Happy holidays and thanks for joining us here at City News. I'm honored to be sitting here with Grand Chief, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Kyra Wilson. Just want to say thank you again for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming today.
And you're here representing 63 First Nations. It's a very big job here in the province. And I want to go back to when you first ran for election following, the passing of late Grand Chief Cathy Merrick. A very difficult time for the Assembly. During that process in the election, how did you make sure that you were able to step into those shoes while also, creating your own path here going forward?
Well, I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to work for my nation, and while I was chief for Long Plain First Nation, I established a great working relationship with our late Grand Chief Cathy Merrick, and she was so supportive and so loving and so kind, and I was able to witness that leadership and that strength that she carried in this role when she was in this role, and I just loved her so much, and I really just supported her. And it was definitely a big loss for everybody, for myself, for the community, for her family, of course. And we obviously never expect anything like that to happen. And when the by-election process was announced, I was unsure at first, just given the fact that I needed to take some time for another loss that I experienced within my family. And I wanted to respect that support that I needed to give my family at that time as well, but also with the loss of our late Grand Chief. And so I wasn't sure at first, but I did have some inquiries surrounding me running and putting my name forward, and with some time and conversations, I made the decision to put my name forward, and it was quite the experience. I had a lot of fun and ran with some really great candidates. I loved every one of those candidates. They're all my friends, and I love them and support them 100%. And it was such a beautiful experience that I'm so honored to be able to sit in this role today.
And what did it mean to you? I was at the ceremony when you got the title. Even those who were running celebrated you, gathered around you. What did it mean to be covered in that blanket and have everyone around you supporting you, knowing that you won?
I look at some of the pictures from that day, and I was so tired, like I was so exhausted, and I had bags under my eyes actually. It was like campaign time, whether it's for this role or local community elections or just any election generally speaking. It's very taxing on not only your physical health, but just every aspect of your health. And so I was very tired that day, but I was so happy and just so excited and just thinking about, like, what does this mean? What are the next steps that I'm going to be taking in this journey? And, I'm just always so grateful. I have no complaints. It's very busy, and days you get very tired sometimes. But I honestly feel like I have the best job in the world.
That's awesome. And like you were saying, there's no break after the election. It's been a year full of a lot for the Assembly. And just over that year, tell me a couple of the highlights that stick out to you of something that you're really going to remember.
Well, of course, as First Nations, we're dealing with issues every single day. We're dealing with crises. We're having to respond to the various issues that we see in our First Nations communities. And first and foremost, I come from a Southern First Nation community, and two communities, Long Plain and Sandy Bay. And really it's been a focus for me to understand what is the living experience for our First Nations people that live in the North. And so I've really pushed to understand what is the realities for our Northern relatives, and really understanding how do I support our leadership and our families in the North. But really what brought that forward was dealing with the wildfires this summer. And we've had some really great partnerships with other First Nations organizations, and how do we support the leadership. And so it really was an eye-opener on what the needs are for a lot of our communities in the North, but even in the South as well. And right now it's really all about coming together for the leadership, supporting the leadership in whatever capacity that I can be there for them. And that's how I really see this role, is supporting our chiefs, supporting our councillors, and supporting the nations that they represent.
And something you were very outspoken from the get-go, I know, talking to you over Zoom when you were first running, treaty rights was a big focus for you even back then. How do you feel like we've progressed as a province with treaty rights, and do you feel like more needs to be done heading into the new year?
Well, we've been talking about the respect and recognition of treaty rights since forever, basically. It feels like we've been talking about that since we've had other groups, I guess, settlers coming to Canada. We've been dealing with the issue of recognition of treaty rights since then. And we hear about the stories of our ancestors and our families really fighting for that recognition. And when we think about rights as First Nations, like we have treaties that were signed, but we also have First Nations that did not sign treaty. And speaking to that would be our Dakota Nations that we have here in Manitoba as well. And so when I think about treaty rights, it doesn't only speak to what we're seeing here in Manitoba. Our different treaty areas, they expand over multiple different provinces. And so we also see some of our nations that cross over into the United States. And so really what we've seen historically is all these invisible borders that have been imposed on our people. And in this role, what I've really wanted to do and have been trying to and continue to do is bring forward, that conversation about treaty implementation and what does that mean today. I know it's very difficult for people to understand. What does that mean? Even for myself, I ask myself, what does that mean for treaty implementation? And I think about that all the time. And so I've been lucky to actually be witness to the King at the throne speech and hearing some of the words that he had shared. We also had met with the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, which is a great first introduction to the conversation. And so there's been a lot of great opportunities, and we'll continue to push forward with the treaty implementation.
And it goes hand in hand, obviously, meeting with the Prime Minister. Nation building has been a main focus here for the federal government in the push to hopefully do it right with First Nations implementation. But just here in the province, with these talks of Bill C-5 and wanting to push projects here in the province with Churchill and other projects, I know recently being AMC brought into the Crown Indigenous Corporation here in the province. How do we make sure that, if nation building is the push forward with, Trump and tariffs and the need to do stuff in Canada, how do we make sure that First Nations are atop of that table and atop of that conversation? Do you feel, the Crown Indigenous Corporation will play a big factor in that? Or how do you think we should progress going into next year while these projects, maybe start rolling out?
Well, the Manitoba Crown Indigenous Corporation was an idea that was proposed by the province of Manitoba. And they came forward and said, we want to work with First Nations here in Manitoba. And of course, we want to know, what is that relationship going to look like? What is the province of Manitoba expect, or what are they needing? Because really at the end of the day, First Nations, being the first peoples here, not only in Manitoba but across the country, we have those rights to lands and resources. So whether it is the province of Manitoba, whether it is Canada, they have to recognize those rights that we carry as First Nations people. And really at the end of the day, it is First Nations that are going to be leading the way in terms of the major projects discussion. First Nations leadership could work directly with industry and proponents and don't really necessarily need to have government involved if they choose not to. So right now we're in a great opportunity to work with different levels of government, and it's really up to the leadership on how they decide to do that. And in this role, I'm here to support the leadership in whatever they decide to do. So it's really up to our leadership to make that decision on how they want to work with the province or how they want to work with Canada. And what does that mean? So the Crown Indigenous Corporation is not something that's ever happened in this country. and it's a first of its kind, and so there's a lot of preparation and a lot of discussions and a lot of engagement, and so right now that's what we're doing to ensure that all of our First Nations their voices are heard and it's reflected in that Crown Indigenous Corporation, if that's the direction that we are headed in.
With everything that's happened over the past year, we're now close to the new year. As we move forward into next year for the Assembly, what are the main goals going forward?
Well, first and foremost, we need to make sure that we have the resources to be able to be involved in these conversations surrounding major projects. So with Canada, with the Major Projects Office, with the province of Manitoba, they need to have First Nations at the table. There is no argument there, and there's no doubt about that. And what we've seen is that the courts are recognizing First Nations rights. We've seen several cases, and what currently we are seeing is those treaty rights are being recognized and acknowledged, and they will continue to be recognized in the courts. So it's really up to Canada and the provinces to ensure that they are respecting that, because we will continue to go to court and we will continue to fight. But we don't need to do that. We can work together. We can find a way. And so with the major projects discussion, I want to make sure that they are investing in that partnership and investing in those relationships. And we need resources to be able to be involved and included in those conversations. And right now what we see is Canada and the provinces, they make money off of the lands and resources, and they don't share any of that wealth with First Nations communities. We know that, and we see it. Actually, we've worked on a report and have just recently finalized a report on the billions of dollars that Canada and the province of Manitoba has received on behalf of First Nations people based off of the lands and resources. Canada sends millions of dollars to the province of Manitoba for our off-reserve populations. And so really everyone else is benefiting financially except for First Nations governments and nations. And so really what we need to see is actually that wealth sharing, and I'm really going to be pushing forward for a table where we are at the table making decisions about where that money is going and how that money is being spent.
And with that profit, hopefully in the future for First Nations, do you think that will help solve a lot of problems that the federal government may not be solving, including winter roads, proper housing on First Nations? Do you think if First Nations are, helping make their own money and getting a share of this, a big share of this, that can solve some problems that are currently, affecting First Nation communities?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We need to be a part of the decision making. The money that the federal government or provincial government, the monies that they are receiving is on the backs of First Nations and the lands and resources that we carry in title as the first peoples of this land. And so really what needs to happen is we need to come together and we need to make those decisions together, because there really is no accountability on how that money is being spent. And what I don't like when I was chief and what I see now is we continually have to write proposals, we have to write grants, and that costs money, and we have to ask different ministerial officials, whether it's federal or provincial, and we need to ask for resources. We want new schools, we want community centers, we want all of these different things that are a basic necessity for a nation, and we're begging the government to recognize those needs, and it usually falls on deaf ears, and we're usually denied. And the different levels of government, they can invest and they can create their own projects and own initiatives without any decision making from First Nations leadership. And really they have all the financial means to be able to do that. But when it comes to our First Nations leadership, we're always begging for pennies, and that's not the way that treaty was supposed to be recognized. Treaties were signed to share the wealth of this country, to share the wealth of the lands and resources, and we have yet to see that. And we will continue to push and we'll continue to fight until we actually receive, what is fairly ours as First Nations people of this country.
And as we look ahead, I wanted to kind of wrap up where we started with the election. Another election coming in 2027. How do you balance doing all this while preparing for that, in the future?
Well, 2027 feels like a long ways away, but it really isn't. Time flies by, especially when you're busy. And right now, I'm really focused on what we're doing today, but also just thinking about the bigger picture and how do we progress and how do we move forward. And really, at the end of the day, I'm here for our leadership. I'm here for our chiefs and our councillors and for our nations and all of the families. And if there is anything that I can do to, feel like I've done the work that I needed to do, is to make sure that there is some systemic change that is happening. As a social worker by trade, that's really what I went to school for, and something that I'm passionate about is removing systemic barriers and having and seeing that systemic change. And anything that I can do in terms of changing the way that First Nations are treated in this country, then I will be happy. And who knows what the future may hold. I mean, Creator makes that decision for us, and we just have to trust in the process. And so right now I'm just focused on today and what I can do to make our lives better as First Nations people.
And lastly, with it being the holidays, in the role as Grand Chief, you're inspiring others, having that standard for others to follow. When you think about the youth, I know it's talked a lot about with Indigenous people about the youth of tomorrow or what we want to do this for. What would you tell the youth, potentially watching this, to either follow their dreams into leadership roles or, continue on their path where, sometimes others are going to put them down?
Well, I used to work with youth prior to leadership, politics, and I just love our young people, our children and our youth, and that's really what I've always been passionate about. And due to COVID, I really moved from working with families in a child welfare aspect and moved to mental health. And one of the things that I've noticed with our young people, some young people anyways, is that we carry so much inside, and sometimes it can feel very heavy, whatever it is that we're dealing with. It could be family, it could be school, work, anything, and it can feel very heavy. And what I would say to our young people is that stay focused, stay motivated, and really think about, what it is that you love doing. Like, what is your passion? Because as soon as you find out, what you're passionate about, and then you're able to figure out, like, what is that gift that you carry? Because we all carry a gift. We all carry a gift, and that is really what we strive for as people, as human beings, is what is our purpose in life. And so when you find your passion, you find out what your gift is, and then you figure out what your purpose is. And when you feel like you have a purpose in this life, then you have so much more to look forward to. So sometimes it feels heavy, and I just say to our young people, don't carry that alone. There's so many people that are around you that love you and support you. And even for myself, my door is always open to our young people, to everybody. And that if you are needing that support, we'll do the best that we can here at AMC to support you in any way possible. So our young people are our future, and we really need to find a number of different ways that we can support them.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. We're really excited to see, what you and the Assembly does in the year ahead. And I just want to say thank you and Miigwech for taking the time, and happy holidays.
Thank you. I appreciate that.